Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World's Panorama, the only show that gives you news from across the globe in the most concise, direct and unbiased reports. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Indian Prime Minister makes a historic visit to Myanmar to boost trade, even as Myanmar's opposition leader Suu Kyi says India is no inspiration for democracy. Mitt Romney gains Republican nomination with Texas primary win, formally sets up battle with Barack Obama. UK celebrates Queen's Jubilee over 4 days, but amidst all that celebration, could there be a downside to it? And King of Chess Vishwanathan Anand wins World Chess Championship for the 5th time in a row, dedicates his victory to his son. This week, we focus on the recent developments around Myanmar. India is moving quickly to cement new trade and diplomatic ties with Myanmar during Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit. His trip is the first time an Indian Prime Minister has travelled to Myanmar in 25 years. After nearly 5 decades of military rule in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, elections in 2010 and a new constitution were ostensibly meant to usher in a return to civilian rule. Manmohan Singh also met opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi on Tuesday, and to discuss the visit and Myanmar's increasing role in the future of Asia, I welcome Mr. Trividesh Maini, Associate Fellow of Observers Research Foundation. Welcome to the show, sir. Before I come to him with any questions on this, why don't we have a look at this report?
Prime Minister Manmohan Singh invited Myanmar's National League for Democracy leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi to New Delhi, even as the iconic pro-democracy leader called for better ties between the two neighbours. Dr. Singh held talks with Suu Kyi in the commercial capital of Yangon on the second day of his landmark visit.
We in India are very proud of our long-standing association with her. I sincerely hope that she will find it possible to visit India soon.
I hope that I will be able to take up this invitation before too long. And more than that, I hope that there will be greater exchanges between our two peoples.
Meanwhile, India signed a number of agreements with Myanmar on Monday in the first visit by an Indian leader in 25 years, aimed at shoring up its presence as rival countries line up to do business with its strategically located neighbour. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh held talks with Myanmar's reformist president Thein Sein in the capital Naypyidaw, where a $500 million line of credit to Myanmar was among the 12 agreements signed.
One of the MOUs we signed was for setting up the Myanmar Institute of Information Technology. PM announced continued technical and financial support for the enhancement of IT skills over the next 5 years.
Sein highlighted that Myanmar is engaged in efforts to attain peace agreements and is also taking security action as and when essential.
The President of Myanmar spoke of Myanmar's efforts to bring the border regions under complete control. As I said, he gave an exposition on the attempts of the government to reach what are called peace accords with the various ethnic groups. And he reiterated once again that no Indian insurgent group or any anti-Indian forces would be allowed on Myanmar territory.
Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's visit comes as competition heats up between Asian powers keen to tap Myanmar's abundant natural resources and its position as a regional crossroads. US and European investors too are sizing up their potential following the recent suspension of most trade sanctions.
With that, let me go across to Mr. Maini. Mr. Maini, as you've looked at this report, especially talking about Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit to Myanmar, it does show in a way that economics can open door to politics as well. So what do you have to say?
I think absolutely it's all about, in the modern day and age, it's a lot about economics, if it's not all about economics. And this trip, the focus was on enhancing connectivity between both countries. There was number of agreements signed in numerous spheres, and the focus was on economics. There was talk of, cooperation against insurgents and other strategic measures. Right. But all through the focus was on, trade, helping Burma, for example, in this phase of information technology, helping it with agriculture, And I think this is a very good start. This sends the right signals. And India did not also talk much about China, at least the establishment's line was very clear. That was another positive. But now I think to cash in on this, it really depends upon the our implementation, the speed of implementation, the level of implementation, and also whether we can enhance connectivity between how we develop our Northeast. Because at the end of the day, I think that is our connector, that is our bridge to Burma. And much as we criticize China for a lot of things, we would do very well to learn from Yunnan province in China, which has become the main trade hub, with Burma. And they've invested a lot in infrastructure. And even though there are problems, there are insurgencies, there is smuggling and things like that, but yet they've gone ahead with the development of infrastructure. So a lot will depend not only upon what we, are the speed of implementation of projects there, but how we develop, for example, our border posts in Manipur. In Mizoram also we begun trade, but as yet it's a very small level. So we need to take that to the next.
Let me just talk a bit more about China, if I can ask you. You're talking about China over here. China must be very closely watching at the developments, how Myanmar is opening itself up to the world, and how different nations are suddenly so much more interested in what's happening in Myanmar and its politics and economics of Myanmar as well. So how does China fit into all this?
I think China as an independent nation obviously is watching what's happening over there. But still, I would say that the level of obsession, in the Chinese media there is, because this week there was a story in the Global Times which did a survey and which tried to say that we are not interested in what India is doing there. But obviously, when they said that, they are watching it. But I think saying that the establishments of both countries, India and China, have taken a very different stand over the past few years. That's why we see a growth of bilateral trade. We see convergences on so many issues, whether it's the BRICS. Now India also wants to have a greater role in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I think the relationship in the economic realm and even at the political level is very different from what the media says in both countries. The media is free to say what it does. And even China obviously will be keeping an eye, because it's not only about strategic competition, it's also about economic competition. But I think just as any other free country, any other country would. And they also made the remark that they're very happy about India's engagement with Myanmar. I think that in itself is symbolic. So, as I said, countries have their own interests, sovereign interests, so you cannot, grudge China that. But as long as the competition is healthy to whatever degree it can be, I think neither side has anything to really fear.
Right. Now, talking about historic things, first was the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Myanmar, and then you also have opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi traveling, to the World Economic Forum, where she's made some very, very bold statements as far as Myanmar is concerned. Do you see, Aung San Suu Kyi being looked at by the people in Burma and others as a big symbol of liberalization?
I think definitely. She's this whole movement towards reform of democratic reforms. It's been her struggle, and it will take a while. There'll be a lot of roadblocks on the way, but she definitely deserves credit. And I think the biggest achievement I think she has so far is that she's been very guarded, and she doesn't want to be viewed as anybody's stooge in that country. So to that degree, she's played her cards very well. And even if she's criticized India, I think that is probably to give the impression that, she's not being propped up. Right. She also has to balance it out. If you say that India is a model of democracy, then there are a lot of people from the Chinese side who would try to, create discontent in that side. So I think she also has to tread a very cautious path and not be looked at either as a stooge of India or as a stooge of the West, of European, because everybody is going there. And it's very easy to be clubbed as somebody's implant over there, which is the biggest mistake she could make. And she's, steering clear of that.
In fact, she's made a very interesting comment as well, a few days back, saying that, implying that India is, so as to say, not a very perfect example for a democracy. So that's quite interesting, the way she sees, India. But also at a time when there's so much international focus on Myanmar, there are for sure some problems that Myanmar faces internally. If you could throw some light on what are those? I
think the first thing is obviously their economy is in total tatters, absolutely. And it's the public sector which has been doing all all the manufacturing and all is held by the public sector. That's the first thing. The level of literacy is very low. And even though, there's talk about this, Chinese involvement over there, but that has not really been able to help even in the development of Myanmar. So domestically, it's in a very bad shape. Institutions, again, no institutions whatsoever. You've been under the of military rule for so long.
Right.
That in itself is a major problem, and that transition is going to take very long, I think.
So a lot of international focus on Myanmar. We'll have to wait and watch that. Is Myanmar turning into a battleground soon, or are these countries genuinely interested in what's happening in Myanmar? On that note, thank you so much, Mr. Meni, for joining me on the show. We'll take a very short break here. Syrian rebels urge international envoy Kofi Annan to declare end of ceasefire. Watch a detailed report after a short break. Welcome back. Mitt Romney clinched the Republican Party's presidential nomination on Tuesday by winning its Texas primary and vowing to get America back on the path to prosperity by defeating Barack Obama in November. But the milestone was clouded by billionaire tycoon Donald Trump himself, a high-profile Romney supporter, questioning President Obama's place of birth. Amid all this, one question prevails in the final 3 months before the new president is unveiled. Where does Romney and more broadly the presidential race go from here? Mitt Romney formally clinched the Republican presidential nomination on Tuesday night, crossing the 1,144-delegate plateau with his victory in the Texas primary. He will be formally nominated as the Republican presidential nominee at the party's convention in Florida late in August. The former Massachusetts governor is the only candidate who actively campaigned in Texas and won 71% of the vote. Polls show a steadily tightening White House race, with Republicans coalescing behind Romney in the week since Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum dropped out. Poll aggregates show Obama just narrowly ahead. The latest Real Clear Politics average shows the president with a 2-point lead. But Romney's big day was overshadowed by his appearance with real estate tycoon and reality television star Donald Trump, who organized a major fundraiser for him in Las Vegas. Trump has been fixated over whether Obama was born in the United States, despite evidence that he was born in Hawaii.
You know, you're not allowed to be president if you're not born in the country.
Romney declined to condemn Trump while reacting to questions from journalists aboard his plane.
I don't agree with all the people who support me.
Former Republican presidential candidate Newt Gingrich also attended the Romney-Trump fundraiser but downplayed the so-called birther issue.
We believe that this is an American-born job-killing president.
The next 3 months will be testing times for Romney and his campaign. Can he withstand what will be a withering attack on his record in the private sector and emerge as a still credible pick in the eyes of voters? Or will the Obama campaign use its financial might to drown Romney out with ads in swing states, ads that turned the November election from a referendum on the incumbent into a choice between Obama and Romney? Over to Syria now, where United Nations Special Emissary Kofi Annan's appeal to President Bashar al-Assad to take bold steps to end the violence in Syria seemed to have fallen on deaf ears, with no guarantee from al-Assad that the 15-month-long crackdown on his enemies would stop. Annan left Damascus on Wednesday with a 6-point ceasefire plan in virtual tatters. What was even more disturbing was a report of UN observers discovering the bodies of 13 people who were killed execution style. Here's the latest.
UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon called on Syria on Thursday to stop its attacks, saying UN observers monitoring the ceasefire were not there to watch innocent people being killed.
The Joint Special Envoy, Mr. Kofi Annan, has expressed his concerns that we may have reached a tipping point in Syria, that the massacre of civilians of the sort seen last weekend could plunge Syria into a catastrophic civil war. I demand that the government of Syria act on its commitment under the Annan peace plan.
Syrian troops resumed their shelling of the Hola region, killing at least one person at the site of a massacre of 108 people last week, after which the US has hinted at taking action against the Syrian regime, bypassing the authority of the UN Security Council.
I think we may be beginning to see the wheels coming off of this bus. And that means that what happens next and the steps that are taken by the Syrian authorities and by this council could well be dispositive.
Earlier in the week, UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus in an attempt to salvage a 6-week-old peace plan that has failed to curb the bloodshed.
What is important is demonstrate through action a real commitment to the plan. I shared with President Assad my assessment that the 6-point plan is not being implemented as it must. We are at a tipping point. The Syrian people do not want a future, their future to be one of bloodshed and division.
The international community has been heaping pressure on Assad's regime after the Hola massacre as Syrian rebels gave the president a 48-hour deadline to comply with the international peace plan. The latest violence emphasized how the peace plan drafted by Annan has failed to stem 14 months of bloodshed or bring both parties to the negotiating table.
With that, time now to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has lost his UK Supreme Court fight against extradition to Sweden to face accusations of sex offences. Britain's Supreme Court on Wednesday dismissed his appeal against extradition to Sweden. The court though gave him 14 days to seek a review after his lawyer argued that the decision appeared to have been made on points not raised during the appeal and that a client might wish to have the case reopened. Until then, Assange would remain on bail. The case could drag on for months if he decides to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights in case the Supreme Court review went against him. A magnitude 5.8 earthquake hit northern Italy on Tuesday, killing at least 20 people in the same region, still struggling to recover from another fatal tremor on May 20th. Officials said several people were trapped under rubble in the Emilia-Romagna region, where several building sites and workshops had just reopened after the previous quake. On Wednesday, the government approved measures to begin the reconstruction of homes, businesses and historic structures, including many churches in the stricken area. Nepal announced the formation of a caretaker government on Tuesday and settled into a tense calm after a weakened constitutional crisis led the Prime Minister to call elections some 4 years in several shaky governments after the country set out to write its national blueprint. But it wasn't clear whether the government would survive until the November 22nd elections after 3 allies left the ruling coalition Monday amidst calls for Prime Minister Baburam Bhattarai's resignation. Urging Pakistan to improve its friendship and cooperation with its neighbours and the world, Chinese Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi on Tuesday vowed his country's continued support to Pakistan's effort to safeguard its sovereignty, security and territorial integrity. Before holding talks with Foreign Minister Kar, the visiting Chinese Foreign Minister held extensive talks with President Asif Ali Zardari, Prime Minister Saeed Yusuf Raza Gilani. He also met Chief of Army Staff Ashfaq Kayani later on Wednesday.
Time for a very short break on World Panorama. After that, we take a look at the flip side to the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebration. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the days to follow, you might see old pictures, videos and other memoirs from the life and times of the reign of 60 glorious years of Queen Elizabeth II. This week on World Panorama, we take a look at the run-up to the grand celebrations and how the Britons won't let something as trivial as a sweeping financial crisis get in the way of a good party.
60 years in the job and ready to party, Queen Elizabeth II has been travelling around Britain for months to mark her Diamond Jubilee. Celebrations will culminate in a 4-day extravaganza in London, including a concert in Buckingham Palace and a 1,000-ship pageant along the River Thames. For a nation that's been told to tighten its proverbial belt, it's quite a splash.
Notwithstanding what the abilities or inabilities of the members of the royal family are, for me it's an irrelevance.
I think it's an attempt to try and take our minds away from austerity, away from the cuts that they're pushing through in Britain and internationally, and to try and take our eyes away onto nice and pretty events.
There is no official estimate for what the entire Diamond Jubilee string of celebrations will cost, but the UK Treasury has budgeted an additional £1 million for royal household expenses during the Jubilee year. And then there's the indirect cost.
At a time of austerity, that's a particularly gross distortion of where our money should be going. That money should be used for the good of the people in Britain and the good of people across the world, I believe.
Visit Britain estimates the monarchy helps generate over £500 million per year from overseas tourists. So while the royal family cost UK taxpayers an estimated £32 million in 2011, there is a strong argument to suggest this represents value for money.
I think it's the fact that for 60 years he's actually been on the throne, and I think that at a time when people are finding austerity very difficult, I think it's nice to take time off and reflect on what's happened.
You can't put a value on the consistency of the Queen's reign. God save the Queen.
Time now to gear up for our next report. Here's all the news from the world of sports. Australian Mark Webber won the Showcase Monaco Grand Prix for champions Red Bull on Sunday as Formula One celebrated an unprecedented 6 different winners in 6 races this season. Germany's Nico Rosberg finished second, while Ferrari's Fernando Alonso was third. Webber led a nail-bitingly close race with the top 3 separated by less than a second at the finish from pole position to checkered flag as a threatened deluge held off despite darkening skies and occasional drizzle. In the constructors' standings, Red Bull have 146 points to McLaren's 108. Kolkata accorded a warm reception to the victorious Kolkata Knight Riders, owned by Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan, who beat Chennai Super Kings by 5 wickets in the final of the 5th edition of IPL. The supporters of KKR hailed them as they moved around in an open-top bus in the city with an aim to express their gratitude to their supporters. Indian cricketer and captain of KKR Gautam Gambhir, along with other teammates like Lakshmipati Balaji and Lakshmi Ratan Shukla, expressed their happiness as the frenzied crowd cheered them. Britain Luke Donald went to the top of the world rankings for the 4th time in 12 months after strolling to a seemingly effortless 4-stroke victory in the PGA Championship in Wentworth on Sunday. Donald took over from Northern Ireland's Rory McIlroy at the summit after shooting a 4 under 68 for a 15 under tally of 273 at the European Tour's flagship event. World number 10 Justin Rose, partnering countryman Donald in the final round, missed a succession of birdie chances and had to settle for a share of second place with 1999 British Open champion Paul Lawrie on 277. Vishwanathan Anand on Wednesday beat Israel's Boris Gelfand in a tiebreaker to retain world title. Anand clinched the tiebreaker 2.5 to 1.5. After drawing on Monday the final regular match in their 12-game Moscow series to leave the World Championships level, the two grandmasters were forced into the chess equivalent of a football penalty shootout. Dubbed the Battle of the Armageddon in chess circles, Wednesday's match saw two of the finest players the world has ever seen lock horns in up to 15 thrilling speed chess games to determine the world champion. After all that sports action, it's time to sit back and enjoy all the very latest from showbiz in the entertainment wrap.
Men in Black 3 took in another $15 million in North America on Monday, pushing its holiday weekend haul to $70 million. That put it at the top of the box office, taking The Avengers down to number 2 with $46.9 million. The movie also topped box offices in 104 countries around the world. It also became the fastest film to cross the 500 million domestic thresholds. Call it a diss or a tribute. Either way, footage has been leaked of Madonna performing a mashup of her song Express Yourself and Lady Gaga's Born This Way during a rehearsal of her world tour. Madonna has publicly commented on the similarities between the two songs before first calling it interesting and then referring to it as reductive. In the footage, Madonna moves seamlessly between the two, then transitions into her song She's Not Me. Justin Bieber is being investigated for an altercation between him and a photographer. A photographer issued a complaint that Bieber physically battered him when he was taking pictures of Bieber, who was with his girlfriend, actress Selena Gomez. Witnesses say the scuffle started when Bieber tried to leave a shopping mall and the man blocked his car from exiting. Bieber got out of the vehicle, asked the man to leave, he refused, and some sort of altercation ensued.
That's all from me in this edition of World Panorama. I'll see you same time next week with more world news. For now, I leave you with these spectacular visuals from Germany, where hundreds of thousands of spectators attend the annual Berlin Carnival of Cultures, a street parade of the German capital's ethnic minorities, with some 4,700 members from 80 communities celebrating the city's cultural diversity.